with education. I mean, look at quail for an example of that. So it was based on humor, and it was also based on direct action at the point of production. But this time we ignored the unions because the unions had just sold us out the other time. And so we won our demands by slowdowns, by sick outs, by trash-ins, by, I mean, you name it. One time they decided they lost their paychecks on Thanksgiving weekend, and we formed a posse in the middle of the factory, and we were going to go to the manager's house and get her, and they suddenly found the paychecks. That's where I got my orientation towards the use of humor and outrageousness, and direct action was from the union movement. And after I moved to California, I worked in the anti-nuclear movement for a little while, and in the Central America movement for a little while. But when I got involved in Earth First, it was the first thing that I had gotten involved with the level of passion that the Vietnam War and the union movement had. And so that's kind of where I got my orientation and experience.
Judy, if I can jump in here and just ask you to push that a little bit further, because earlier you said that you could never have become a deep ecologist or a revolutionary ecologist had you stayed in Maryland. And so I wonder if you could talk about, as we've had an opportunity to do, the experiences that made a deep ecologist out of you.
Okay, well this was very backwards too. See, I came from everything from the back door. Most environmentalists, unfortunately, I'm sad to say, a lot of them are from more privileged groups, and most of them don't live in the areas that they're defending. And I live in the area that I'm defending, and the way that I came to be in Earth First, it was a very bizarre way. I was working as a carpenter for a commercial car. I got a divorce, I had to support my kids. I still didn't have a college degree after all these years, and I was living in a rural area, but I had built several houses. This is back to the land stuff, so I had some carpentry skills. I got myself a job as a commercial carpenter, and I found myself building yuppie houses out of old-growth redwood back in the hills. And it was this one particular house I was building. It was a 2,500 square foot. It was really gross. It was supposed to be a weekend party house for this veterinarian from the Bay Area to just come on the weekend, go wild boar hunting and bring the babes. And the grossest part was they had this glass shower that we had to learn to do glass bricks where they kind of stuck out so that he could go outside and watch the babes taking their showers. It was a very disgusting thing to build. And but I was looking at these boards, and they were like these 20-foot long boards with this teeny beeny grain and no knots or anything, and they were redwood. And this little light bulb went off over my head, and I said to the bookkeeper, "Is this old growth redwood?" And he said, "Oh yeah, this stuff's 1,000 years old." And I went, "Holy shit." And I realized that not only should this tree have never been cut, because we were back in the hills, we had to drive past the devastation. We had to drive past beelines of log trucks coming out to get to the places where we were building these yuppie houses. And I began to see the connection between my job was destroying the earth. I was building something totally useless for somebody who had no right to have another home, and out of a tree that should have never have been cut. So I put a picture of the clear cut on his living room wall, as I was building it, but that didn't make me feel better enough. And then I kind of looked around for the most radical group around, because that's kind of was already my orientation, and I found Earth First, and I found that Earth First would put their bodies in front of the destruction and play music and sing funny songs while they did it. So that's how I ended up an Earth Firster. I kind of began to hear about deep ecology, that it didn't ring so much. It rung a little bit, but it wasn't until the first thing we saved, which was Caddo Wilderness, which you all saw the video of, that hilarious action that we had to save it. But in the course of that action, we thought we were going out for a little one-day demonstration, and we ended up in the woods for 3 days, right? I lost the last day because I had to go back to work. But so for me, I was in the woods for 2 days, and it was the first time I had ever been in a wilderness area or thereabouts, Laytonville, for any extended period of time. And I saw how the forest accepted us and protected us, and I began to feel what it felt like. And the more that I spent time in the forest, the more the forest spoke to me, and spoke to me in a way that you can't express in words. And the idea of deep ecology not only began to make a lot of sense to me, but as somebody who came out of a kind of a leftist radical background, but I never felt quite comfortable with those ideas. I mean, Marx missed two pieces, the women and the earth. And I never felt quite comfortable. I knew there was something missing in those theories, and I began to see that the relationship of the society to the earth was the missing piece. So that's how I became an ecologist.
Do you think that sustainable forestry would be wrong?
No, I don't. In fact, we're helping to promote it. As part of because we've always been working with a lot loggers, at least as long as I've been in, because my background was in factory work. I knew I had the same amount of sympathy for the people in the mill as I did for the person sitting out in the street. And so I always made a point to humble myself in the eyes of the loggers and ask them what they know. And I found out some real interesting things. You know, it's a great way to meet people when they're blockaded, they can't go anywhere. And they'd start talking to us, and I wouldn't be saying what they'd be expecting to hear. And I showed that the conditions of my life weren't real different from theirs. I was supporting 2 kids with, you know, an industrial job also, and my job was to destroy the earth also, that it wasn't the idea of carpentry that was wrong, it was what we were building and why and how. And that the liquidation logging is just as destructive to the loggers and the economy as it is to the ecology. So, but when you say sustainable logging, now what does that mean? And that's where we have the problems, because the corporations, what they define as sustainable logging is nowhere near sustainable, because as reductionist scientific method people, they say, okay, we'll cut down all these trees and then we'll plant all these baby trees and that's sustainable. Well, it isn't. Old growth is not sustainable. You can't replace old growth. You know, if it takes 1,000, 2,000 years to grow, they've cut down almost all of it in 150 years. But in our area, the forest is so damaged that in order to, well, after you cut down all the softwoods, the firs and the redwoods, the hardwoods, the oaks, and they come up in proliferation on, you know, they just kind of strangle the place. And also even the redwoods and the firs, they come with these little teeny peckerpoles, and they're real close together, and they're a big fire load because they're all this small stuff. And the natural progression of the forest, I think, would be, you know, the lower limbs die as the trees grow. But when all the trees are cut at once, there's tons of dying lower limbs, which are a tremendous fire load. So the forest is very out of balance in our area. And in order to restore the balance of the forest, that it actually helps to thin the hardwoods and to limb up some of this dead stuff and get it out of the way so it doesn't form a fire ladder. And people, some of the loggers in our area, have begun to develop methods of restorative forestry, where they instead, we call it earth first logging. Actually, they invented the word earth first logging. Dave Foreman would turn over in his grave if he was dead. Have you heard that? Anyway, I don't really mean that. I actually like it, I respect it. But we have some differences which we both acknowledge. At any rate, that the forest actually has helped in its recovery if you thin out some of the trees that are growing in too much proliferation. And then what the timber companies do, because they're into efficiency and they're into this big industrial model, is when they come in, they cut all the little stuff and they just throw it in, chip it up and use it for pulp or for wafer-board, glue it together with toxic glues. But the local people, for the local loggers who are trying to find out a way that we could live in the forest and not destroy the forest, discovered if you do the value-added processes on the site or as close as on the site, so you could get as many jobs and value as possible out of the wood in the region where it's cut. So instead of chipping up the hardwoods and using it for pulp, they discovered that you could mill the hardwoods, and they just developed a method of kiln drying it so that it wouldn't check or warp, you know. And they discovered that you could make beautiful flooring and stuff like that out of this tan oak, which the timber companies just considered weed trees. And so since if you build these local economies, there's actually this one called Institute for Sustainable Forestry in Humboldt County, started by a logger named Jan Iris, who developed some of these techniques. And then in Mendocino County, where I live, I'm actually one of the co-founders, along with a fifth-generation logger, of something called the Mendocino Realwood Co-op, in which we're trying to have on a small scale, because a third of the timberland is owned by small private owners instead of big corporations. And that's where most of the trees are, because corporations have cut almost all of theirs. And so small owners who want their land logged respectably to be united with loggers who want to log in a respectable manner, that's the idea of the co-op. And since this is done on such a small scale, it's hard to deal with these big markets. It's a cooperative so that you can fill orders, you know, by sharing the different, like we have all these people with these little called wood miser mills, or these little portable mills. So you bring the mill right to the spot. And you can get as much value in a pickup truck of milled lumber as you can get on a great big logging truck of unmilled lumber. So by eliminating this huge industrial thing, and by trying to develop logging methods that look at the forest and say, what does this forest need to do to recover, and then what sellable products can we make from doing that process? And so that's the idea of restorative forestry that we've been working on, and we've been looking at quite hard.
What's keeping the status quo from practicing sustainable forestry?
Well, the corporations have no interest in it. They can make more money by liquidation. When they're done with our area, which they almost are, they're on to Siberia, where 57% of the oil growth in the world is located. And that's, I mean, this is Louisiana Pacific, Georgia Pacific, and Max, and none of them are based in our area. We're a third world country to them. They come in and they take the logs, they finish it up, and they move on to the next area. They can make more money that way. They have no interest in in sustaining the community or the forest, because they can go on to another forest somewhere else. And they even the tree farms that they do, there's no point in doing tree farms where we live. It's all the steep terrain. They can't, they'd be better off with their tree farms in the south where it's flatter. So their interest in our area is liquidate, make all the money they can, and get out. And that's what I mean about a local control of the economy, that if the economy is in the control of local people who have an interest in the long-term health of the region, both the human community and the forest. Because the thing about loggers is they've lived there for 5 generations. There's no way that forest doesn't speak to them too. I mean, how arrogant are we hippies to think we move in and it talks to us, and they're born and raised there and it doesn't talk to them? They know what's going on, same as we do. Some of them are brainwashed, some of them have been led to believe because of cultural differences and because of arrogance of some of the environmentalists that we're their enemies instead of the companies. But most of them know, some of them overtly and some of them deep down, that the corporation is what's screwing them. And but as Ernie Pardini is the 5th generation logger that whose idea the Mendocino Railroad Co-op was, and what he said is, no matter what we loggers think, we can't support a movement that ends all logging and doesn't give us a way to live in this area. If we have to leave the area as part of the solution, we're not going to support that solution. And so he says we have to build an alternative economy so that we can stay in the area. Even the people who speak out, they immediately get fired and blacklisted, and then they can't live and they have to leave the area, and then we've lost our spokespeople. So the idea of building the alternative economy at the same time as we confront the destructive economy is what we're doing there.
You might be getting a little too far ahead. We've been talking about the Redwood region, but we all know that it's a global environment. And one of my interests is with South America and Central America, and I participate in the model OAS. Every year we go to Washington and we do our little thing. And one thing I want to work on is this problem with sovereignty. The OAS, one of their main principles is what do I want to say? Recognizing that each country has their own sovereignty, and they're very into non-intervention. Can you make any suggestions, possibly?
Well, see, that's a hard question. What do you mean by sovereignty? Do you mean that we recognize the military government that overthrew Allende because the United States sponsored a COINTELPRO-like operation to depose a democratically elected president who, as a matter of fact, what was Allende doing to earn the wrath of the United States? He was nationalizing the copper mine so that we couldn't rip it off for our benefit with very little being given back to Chile. So I think that's a harder question than to say whatever government is in power right now. Whatever government is in power now has the right to exploit the resources of their country to give them to us. That's not sovereignty to me. Guatemala destroying the native cultures, in order to support the United States United Fruit Company. The coup that was done in Guatemala was outrageous. In the name of United Fruit Company, it was one of the first COINTELPRO brilliant operation. This backwards country, right, without all these communications. And what they did is they had a fake army. It was very interesting how they overthrew the democratically elected government of Guatemala. They said they have these few radio stations, and they'd go up and they'd say, "The army is advancing, it's coming towards the capital," and people would be fleeing in the wake of this army, and there never was an army. And they did this whole entirely psychological operation to cause disarray in the country, and then they come in with a military coup and put in a puppet government. And I don't think that puppet governments, I don't think that governments where a privileged elite within a country sells the resources of that country to the United States, destroys the lifestyle of people who have lived there for eons, to benefit the United States so that a couple people in that country can get money. I don't think that that's a sovereign state. I think it's a harder question than sovereignty. It's whose interest is the country being run in. And it's hard for somebody from another country to make, sometimes it's easy, Chile, Guatemala, Nicaragua, some of those are easy. But it's not always that easy to say, this country, you can't come in and say, well, we don't like your government, so we're gonna do what we want, because that's what our country does, and that sucks. But, but I don't think that we can accept all of those governments as being sovereign. They're not legitimately empowered. They're empowered by using absolutely brutal methods of repression.
But if a country was to say, no, sorry, we don't want to limit our production to CFCs or whatever would be detrimental to the environment, they're still cutting down, their forests. And
but they never used to cut down their forests until we started
they had a
buying
market
the wood.
here.
Yeah,
Right.
and until we destroyed the other methods that they used to live by. So, again, there has to be some kind of global responsibility that, you would say they don't want to cut their production of CFCs. We're the worst country in the world for that. So I guess what I really feel like is that we need to, we live in the belly of the beast. The best thing that we can do for the people of Chile is to overthrow our government, not to overthrow theirs. And so I feel like, I think it's more situational. I think that, like going to other countries and working and stuff is an awesome thing to do. But I think we need to remember that we're outsiders and not be so quick to pass a judgment, and say this is the way it ought to be and you do it our way and all those things. I think it's a difficult question, and I think that we work most effectively in our own areas if we're going to take something as audacious as deciding whether the government has a right to exist. We can do that best in our own area.
I have a question. You talked about coalition building in terms of community, that's really the way to, in terms of getting community members and things, and that's really the way to build a coalition in terms of to fight with the corporate power. And I'm just wondering, it seems really odd to me that environmental groups in the United States can't even come together on a coalition in terms of there's fighting within different environmental groups in the United States. They can't come together on a coalition on, I think we all have a common interest, and we can't even come together on that. And I was just wondering if you see in the future some kind of something that's going to bring us all the environmental groups together in the United States, or not just in the United States, but
eventually, if a crisis gets bad enough, more and more people begin to see what side to fall on that crisis. But it's not just that people can't get together. It's that there's really two different kinds of environmental groups in this country. There's the big kind of corporate model ones, like Wilderness Society and what's the one with WMI on their board? That's Wilderness Society, isn't it? But some of these big groups that are based in Washington that have a corporate structure themselves. And they're big hierarchies, and they don't live in the area they're defending, and they don't have any respect for the people who do. They make decisions about Oregon and Washington, and then they, and since they don't have experience in that area, they often don't take into account the community. And they're into compromising and making deals to advance their own organization, not to advance the interests of the forest or whatever they're fighting for. And so, like when Clinton comes out with Log Option Number 9, which there's also a song about, with Log Option Number 9, which is basically an excuse to go in and destroy more of the last little piece of old growth that's left. And some of the environmental groups get behind it. Well, it's not that we don't get along. It's not that we're trying to not get along. It's not that we're contentious. It's that some of the environmental groups aren't working in the interest of the environment. They're working in the interest of their environmental group. And the kind, like even Greenpeace, which is one of the more progressive, this direct action at the point of production is a very interesting thing, because Greenpeace does direct action, but very rarely at the point of production. They hang a banner somewhere, but that's not stopping production. That's just, so that's the difference between Greenpeace and Earth First, hanging a banner or hanging a banner on the bulldozer that you're chained to. But anyway, even Greenpeace, which is one of the more progressive ones, it's a big many group, and it has a top-down hierarchy. And it has a repeat of the corporate structure. On the bottom are these little canvassers that have one of the shittiest jobs in the world, if anybody's ever done it, knocking on doors trying to beg for money for, I tell you about to sing this one too, but the last verse of the Greenpeace song about the demise of Greenpeace goes, and now an army of canvassers with pictures of baby seals and such comb suburban neighborhoods and try to make quota for Greenpeace. Anyway, but, and that these people, they don't have any control over their working conditions, nor do they have any control over what campaign they work on. Greenpeace will say to us, okay, we're going to send in a group of canvassers to do this and this, and the canvassers don't get any say over it. Where they get sent to here or sent to there. And the top-down corporate model, I think they repeat some of the problems of the society. The canvassers and Greenpeace up in Seattle actually tried to organize. They joined the Wildlies, they formed a union, and they tried to, because they were being forced to do pressure sales pitches, and they didn't want to do it, so they were the phone bank workers. So Greenpeace management, I mean, imagine management, an environmental group, they put in a listening device so that they could listen in on their conversations and make sure they were using the high-pressure techniques. So the workers went on strike and formed a union, and Greenpeace did the traditional corporate response to unions. It's called runaway shop. They shut down the shop and moved to Boston where there was no Greenpeace union. And so when the environmental groups begin to repeat the structures and problems of the society that they're trying to change, that's why we're not getting along. It's not just because we're a bunch of ideologues. It's because there's two different methods of working going on here. There's the grassroots bottom-up one, which the toxics movement shares with Earth First, except they don't share the radicalism and direct action, but they do share the bottom-up kind of thing in the coalition building. And then there's the top-down, big power, big money groups, and that's, you know, we can't get along with groups that are going to compromise as far as to increase their own prestige. I don't know, that doesn't say yes, but that's the answer why we don't get along. I'll tell you that.
Can I ask one more small question?
Yeah.
Of course, the swan, I know it's surrounded people of men, swan men, and I'm just wondering if the symbol, the fist, the fist symbol, it doesn't. It seems like if the thing is Earth First, I know that like that's kind of a power thing, and you're standing up for Earth First, and that's through the fist, but at the same time, isn't that putting humans first? Kind of saying humans are going
Actually, this is actually a paw.
I thought it was a flower all these years.
No, actually, when I draw, it always looks like, yeah, that's a
I
good
was
point.
going to ask
That
you,
is a good
would
point.
you want that to be a bear paw?
It probably would, except that we've had this for so long, we're used to it. And this is the international symbol of solidarity. This is Earth First. This is Earth Fist. Okay. And so this is the symbol, not this. So it's not as macho aggressive as it seems. This is an international symbol, and it's a symbol of resistance and a symbol of solidarity. And I mean, I guess it's just it's been there for a long time, and it scares them. And,
It's also isn't it an old symbol of solidarity and union solidarity?
Oh, sure.
And we have in our area, this is the symbol for Earth First now, right? So the working people who have, that has been something in their heritage, they don't even know. They have these bumper stickers that have the fist symbol with a circle slash, and then it says, t-shirts, and then it says jobs first. And essentially it's kind of like in 1984 where they double speak. It cancels out its own meaning. 2 + 2 is 5, right? Their own symbol, they're crossing
With the circle
out.
and well, actually, because what the anti-environmental movement really means is management first. It's and that's what we keep pointing out about this stuff. That these groups, these WISC groups, they represent management. They don't represent the workers. They're totally against the workers having any kinds of rights or any kinds of decent working conditions. They're just for the rights of management to cut more trees. So, but yeah, that's true, it is. And this is a symbol that's been used just for ages and ages and ages. It certainly wasn't invented by Earth First.
And it's not the bears that have to change their ways. The humans that have to change our ways.
I don't disagree with it. I was just
I
wondering.
always do. I can't draw it good.
I was just wondering in terms of, if the message is Earth First,
Mhm.
should there be a symbol that
Yeah.
join, like a paw and a fist and in the circles joining, or
I think that's a great idea, and I think that our symbols, just as our ideology and our methodology, need to evolve. I mean, just because it's always been doesn't mean it always has to be. And there's lots of Earth First T-shirts. I don't know, the women's Earth First one is very nice too. It was come from this beautiful banner, and it's a silhouette of a woman holding a monkey wrench up to the moon. And but there's various symbols, and I think that finding more appropriate symbols is fine. And one of the great things about Earth First is it's totally decentralized. So no matter how perverted it may be in what, you can make your own group anything you want to. And that was when I had to decide whether to be Earth First or not, I think I told you about that yesterday, that I was appalled by this tree spiking and the George Alexander thing, but I was really attracted to the the direct action and the music and the laughter and the spirit of it, and I wasn't sure what to do. And Daryl Cherney, who's the person who was blown up in the car with me, who was my music partner and organizing partner at the time, and he said to me, okay, well, you can go ahead and start a new group, start your Mendocino environmental group, and then you got to start from scratch, or you can call it Earth First, and the timber companies will quake in their boots. And so I thought that was a good reason to call it Earth First. But the other reason was, even though Earth First was started by 5 men, at a brothel no less, it was organized in a feminist manner. It was decentralized with hierarchy taken out of it. That there was no, although officially there was this hero worship, unofficially this was kind of hero worship, which we've had to get rid of. For one thing, it's too dangerous to the heroes. It still exists, I know, but we're getting past it. We're getting a lot better. We're getting a lot better. I mean, we're moving from that. But it was completely decentralized. If you join the Sierra Club, you have to sign a charter. And if you do something that the top Sierra Clubbers don't like, you get booted. That happened. When the local Sierra Club supported Redwood Summer, the state Sierra Club dissolved their chapter. But Earth First is 100% decentralized, and each chapter, although they're not called chapters, can form any way they want, as long as you accept the principles of biocentrism, direct action, and no compromise. Then you're an Earth Firster, and it doesn't matter whether you hate the symbol and you invent your own symbols. It doesn't matter whether our group evolved so differently from the other groups that I think that it really is a testimony to that kind of organization. So that's what I have to say. If you don't like it, change it. I understand that.
We were talking about how animals and humans are supposed to be the same. Are you essentially the same, morally considerable, or whatever?
Yeah, well, you have equal right to exist with everything.
Yeah, equal right to exist.
Mhm.
So is it more evil for man then to destroy the environment and change it to a different environment than it is for an animal to do the same thing?
Well, I don't know very many animals. I mean, maybe dinosaurs did that.
Beavers,
No,
ants.
they don't destroy the environment.
Yes, they
No,
change
it's
it.
not, yes, they change it, and so do humans, so do tribal humans who live completely in harmony with nature. It's not true that humans have no impact on nature when they live in harmony with it. The Indians, for example, burned to create fields so that there would be a variety of food sources. The problem was they did it in a manner that didn't destroy the earth, it didn't make the ecosystems collapse. They did it in a manner that could be sustained over the ages.
Because there
So
was so few
it's
of them,
not
so
wrong to change it.
They would.
In our area,
It's not a
Indians
problem.
essentially, they'd light like whole prairies on fire,
Right.
just let it burn. They
Right,
wouldn't care how far
right.
it went, hundreds of miles, whatever.
Well, they
Probably
didn't care how
doesn't
far it
matter.
went, but
They really.
it was
as long as it
controlled,
didn't
and in
affect
fact, the
them.
women were in charge of fire. But yeah, no,
They
that was
run
where,
hundreds of buffalo off a cliff. I mean, they weren't,
you know,
but that wouldn't.
and I'm
injure the
agreeing
entire
with you, I'm
environment
agreeing
because there are
with
few of
you.
them.
Every
Very
species
different.
has an impact on the earth, and that's okay. It's just not okay when a species' impact on the earth destroys the ability of the earth to exist for all species. And it isn't even only a moral question, this is a practical question too. I don't know if it was immoral, I don't know why the dinosaurs died, but let's just say that the dinosaurs died by consuming too much of their environment and changing the environment until it couldn't support, because thousands of species went extinct with them. This isn't even so much, it isn't a moral question, I don't think. It's just a question of, if we are the supposedly intelligent species that are supposedly mapping our own course, is this a course that we want to map? Where we really want to deplete the earth and have it have this downward spiral of productivity until it can no longer support us and other species, that just for our benefit we should use so much of it. When of course we can use the earth, but we have to use it in balance with other species so that all of the species, or as many as possible, can survive. And that's what deep ecology, it's misrepresented to say that that humans can have no impact on the earth. The whole concept of wilderness is bullshit. The idea that wilderness has to be something that humans don't go into. There never used to be a concept of wilderness until society started destroying everything. We tried to save these little patches. And the very idea, okay, here's this wilderness area, and you can only go into it if you backpack and you don't have any amenities. Well, tribal people didn't live in the wilderness without any amenities. They had amenities. So this society is just sick. It's so out of balance. It doesn't know
Specific
its place.
example of what I said. is it more evil for humans to build a big city? The only thing that can live there is humans, cockroaches, rats,
Cats and
squirrels,
dogs.
rabbits, etc. Is that more evil than, say, when a beaver builds a dam, kills off all the stream-living animals?
It's a
So
matter
that
of
only
scale.
pond-living animals can be in there?
It's a matter of
Conscious.
scale, you know?
Consciousness too.
Scale.
I mean, you're the one equating humans and animals.
No, I'm just trying to see
You say
exactly
there's
how
no
it
difference
is.
between a beaver does not
A
consciously.
beaver dam in New York City are not on the same
Do we-
scale to me.
Do we consciously build cities? We do that because it's more efficient, because if we didn't, we wouldn't be able to have as many people.
But we don't,
Right,
we
but we
don't
also
need this
dump
many
toxins
people.
into the
But we
water,
can be-
but a
Which
beaver
should
doesn't.
be changed.
We can
change.
become conscious.
I'm not saying the world's a perfect way to
A
live,
beaver has evolved to its place in an
as
ecosystem.
have we.
No, we haven't, we're
Cities
out
are
of
an
balance.
ecosystem.
Beavers
We're
don't
out of
make
balance
choices.
with it.
You could,
We seek to
you might be able
evolve
to
to
argue
a
that
place in an
humans don't make
ecosystem, but we ain't there.
do I really have a choice?
I don't
if
choose to
live
make
in
that
a
argument. I'd like you to get into bioregionalism a little bit more and explain why it is a really, positive force.
Okay, well, first of all, I think that the way that we need to organize our human society to be in harmony with nature is to imitate the way that nature organizes society, the non-human, the collective society of all species. And that's done by bioregionally, that areas interact with each other. There's not, there's basic laws of nature that seem to apply everywhere, but, there's ecosystems, there's interacting systems, and they're defined by climate and by what kind of plants and things like that grow there. Well, if you live in a place like, for example, Los Angeles, okay, that doesn't really have the resources to support a human population, the only way that you can get those is by ripping them off from another place, the Colorado River, bringing all the water in to what is supposed to be a desert. And so now you're not only impacting this area, you're impacting that area over there, and you're doubling the impact. And so in order for humans to learn to live in harmony with the earth, we need to account for all of the impacts on the earth. So if we live in this area and we depend on being fed from way over there, using all kind of energy to bring the stuff over from this part of the region, and then we take our products and ship them out someplace else, we are using more products up to transport things. We're using more destruction of the earth to transport them, and we're building a structure that's 100% dependent on technology that is enabling us to rip off extra sections of the earth besides the one that we're living on. So if we're talking about building a sustainable society has to be one that could continue indefinitely, that could continue over the ages. And if we're not able to live in the region that we're living in the manner that, if we hadn't destroyed the earth, it's all hard to talk about because we've destroyed the earth so far that it can't support us anymore the way that it used to. I mean, the prairie used to be just rich with all kinds of stuff, and now it's all wheat and corn, and so it's kind of become monocultured out, and it's hard to see it now. In our region, even though ours could probably support the population right now if it didn't have to support the city, there used to be zillions of birds in the sky and much more plants and thousands of different things that aren't there anymore. So it's almost hard to talk about bioregionalism in the state of depletion that the earth is in. I think bioregionalism is something that we need to move toward. It's not something we can instantly declare and live in, or even something that's even easy to conceptualize at this stage in the discussion of the earth. But I think that it needs to be one of our goals, that now in order to live in harmony with the earth, we need to live in places in the earth that are suited for human habitation, and that we need to live within the limits imposed by nature. So if it's an area without much resources, there needs to be not much people in it. And that's, I guess that's what I'd say about bioregionalism.
I know we had at least two new voices, Craig and right over here, Judi.
Oh, okay, good.
Can you tell us about where you live?
Well, I live in a town that's called Willits. Willits. We have a song about Willits too. Well, first of all, I live in a county called Mendocino, and it's the dying southern edge of the redwood ecosystem. The redwood ecosystem used to go from southern Oregon all the way down to the middle of California, and now it's been paved over, farmed over, built cities over, so that only half of the land that used to support redwoods can ever support redwoods again, or at least maybe not without a lot of intervening steps. So the redwood ecosystem has been condensed to the north, and I live on the dying southern edge of it. And Alicia lives farther north where there's still old growth trees, but there's virtually no old growth in the area where I live. Most of it is second growth that was cut in the 1800s, or there are several rounds of cutting, and the oldest trees in our area are only 100, 150 years old. And it's a rural area. I don't know what to compare it with in size. It's a sprawling county.
It takes me 2.5 hours to get to Judy's house, and we see each other pretty often.
And it's an hour and a half drive to a meeting is considered normal. There's 90,000 people in the entire county, and the biggest quote-unquote city is Ukiah with 12,000 people. My town, Willits, has just under 5,000, and it's the third biggest quote-unquote city. And the town is in a valley, and the valley has got there used to be 13 mills in the valley, and there's only one left because almost all the trees are gone. And so there's a lot of unemployed loggers and mill workers who mostly live in the valley. And circling the valley, it's kind of a circular valley with mountains around it, and up in the mountains there's 3 separate hippie settlements. And I live in one of the hippie settlements. And I live on a mountain that's got an upland valley. It's really cool, and it's flat land, but it's up on a hill, and so there's like trees around me that form like this protective ring. And the area that I live in was logged in 1956. It was practically clear cut, and it's recovering. And it looks like if you left it for another 200 years, it would probably be okay. But the stream, even just 25 years ago when the hippies came, used to have salmon in it. Now it dried up last summer for the first time in 25 years. So the area is very damaged, but it's also recovering. And if you're at my house, I live in this little hippie shack, and it's about 800, 900 square feet. And I have, it's kind of in this little meadow that's surrounded by these trees. And you can't hear any human sounds any human sounds that you don't make. Yeah, except for her calling her cat. And there's this kind of a Wild West mentality because of the spread outness and because of the fact that as the timber has been gone, the county is scared to death of the timber corporations, and so they won't tax them or anything. And the timber companies actually pay so little in timber tax that they don't even pay for the road repairs that they cause with their logging trucks. So the county is going broke. They've shut down the libraries. They're cutting police service. Sometimes it's 2 hours to the nearest police station. So there's very much a Wild West mentality in a lot of the places, and people don't think a lot of pulling out a gun and stuff like that. It's a very, very, there's a dual economy. You're either a logger or a pot grower. And that's kind of those are the two things that go on in there. And it's also an outlaw mentality for those reasons. So it's very different than here. I don't know what else you want to know
I want to
about.
tell about my
Yeah, tell where she lives.
I live up 10 miles north of a town called Garberville in a community called Salmon Creek, named that because the road and the whole community was built around Salmon Creek. But I mean, it's hard to even describe it. I live 8 miles out this road. Pavement ends about a mile before you get to my driveway. And my driveway goes another 1/4 mile through this meadow.
And it's all steep up and downhill, isn't it?
And so then you park your car, you get all your stuff, you put it on your back, and you hike down the hill and into a gully. It's about a 6 minute.
I can't get to her house.
About a 6-minute hike, and then I live in a 13-foot diameter yurt, which is a round structure with this little door that you push in, and this little sink, and this little table, and this one room, 13 feet in diameter.
It's as
smaller
big as
than
some
a
hot
circle.
tubs.
Yeah. And then I have a garden, and you go up a little path, and there's a meadow, and there's cedars around. But the particular area is very meadowy. There's a whole lot of meadows and little patches of forest. And what happened in my area, I'm in the middle of the redwood region, but they came in and they cut everything up until about 8 years ago. They were logging back in Salmon Creek. And then they logged at the turn of the century, and then the Forest Service realized that, and they turned it all into grazing land. So there was like 5,000-acre ranches and stuff, and a lot of cattle, sheep, goats, just a whole lot of big grazing happening. And they realized that the forests weren't coming back and the land was unhealthy, and somehow they got this idea of replanting trees. So they came in with all these exotic species like pine and cedar, and they just plunked them into the ground in rows. So we had like these clumps of pine, and very strange looking. And then there's even some eucalyptus, which only belongs in Australia. But there's this beautiful redwood, beautiful fir, cedar, and then pine trees and eucalyptus trees. And it's magnificent. I mean, you can see there's mountain ranges, and it's quiet. The sunset is like the most outrageous time of day. The sky turns a million different colors, and it's amazing, but it's so different. So different.
I'm in the remote area. I live in Laytonville, or outside of the town of Laytonville, which is like
Near Cotto.
Cotto. It's the largest wilderness area left in Mendocino County, and I kind of live right butt up to that area, which is it's BLM land, which is rare for the county because most of the county timberlands are private corporate timberlands, and this is BLM, so it's a little different. But I live next to a creek called 10 Mile Creek, which runs through a valley that we call the Long Valley, which is a real long, narrow valley. And I live in this place where I live. You can't get to my house during the winter, but a suspension cable footbridge, which is kind of a fun trip. I built my own cabin out there with wood that I cut and milled, with friends who had a mill. So, it's like...
You have to ford a stream with your car to get to his house.
In the summer, and then in the winter you can't do that.
And then you have to walk across a bridge that's made out of a fallen log.
Yeah.
And he built his house in 3 weeks.
Actually, I'm still doing it. Like, oh boy, I better find
And he has
something.
I have solar electricity and I have running wire. I have all this bourgeois stuff. For one thing, because I'm disabled, and when I moved into it, I wasn't planning on having this much. But for one thing, because the government wanted to harass me and didn't want me to get to move back, so the building department came and busted us and made us put in a septic system. We were just going to have an outhouse. Both of y'all just got outhouses, right?
There's a hole.
You have a hole. You have an outhouse or a hole?
It'll pass.
It's a bunch of doors.
I have an outhouse with a little moon on it. It's actually really got a little moon on it. It's very cute, and it's a great outhouse, but the building department busted us. And so I also have a bathroom, and I have a Paloma heater. It's a demand heater. It's inside I have a refrigerator, which runs on propane. That's my little
That's like the
unsustainable.
bourgeois
That's
thing.
totally bourgeois. There's no gas lines going out to where I am, right? So, but the totally bourgeois thing, because I get to live cushy because I'm disabled, right? So anyway, but I have a refrigerator and it runs off of propane, which is a better technology. It doesn't use. It was a technology that predated electric refrigerators and CFCs. It used to say refrigeration was a miracle because you could make ice from fire. And the way a refrigerator works is that you use electricity to have this compressor that goes, and you can hear it at night, and it compresses the air, and then the air gets forced through these little tubes, and then it sucks the heat out of the refrigerator as it goes through these tubes, and it's cooling. I'm not exactly sure. I used to know this exactly, but I don't anymore. Anyway, the same effect that they get by compressing the air with electricity, they can also get by heating the air with a little teeny propane flame. So this is an old technology that predated electricity, and it works just as good. I got a refrigerator and a freezer and all that stuff, and it makes no noise at all. Absolutely zero noise, and it runs on a little propane flame. I have these 2 propane tanks that we have to take them to town to fill them up when they run out. And so that's definitely a non-sustainable part. And then the propane also runs my hot water heater, and it's a demand heater, which means when you turn on the hot water, a flame heats the water as it goes through the pipes. There's no stored hot water. And then the electricity I have is solar, with my solar panels that haven't quite produced enough electricity to make up for the amount of oil it took to build them yet. But that means I have only 12-volt electricity, and my light bulbs are either 25 watt or the luxury. I have 250 watts. And we use way, way less electricity, and we use candles to supplement it in the winter. You only light the area that you're working in, and you get used to this pattern of light and dark. And my parents freaked out, how can you live like this? But after you get used to it, it actually feels better to have a pattern of light and dark in your, and once I got used to it, it feels very strange to be around these lights at night. And when I always had 110 electricity in the walls, I never thought anything of it. But now, you can feel it vibrating. When you're not used to having it anymore, it's really intrusive, and it kind of makes everything more hyper. And when you don't have it, everything's more relaxed. And that's part of what I mean by thinking we're giving up things and finding out we aren't really giving up anything.
Neither Todd nor I have electricity.
Of any type.
I have a phone because I strung a 400-foot line from the main house on the land through the trees to my little house because I'm an activist and I thought I needed a phone.
But she's never home, so it doesn't help.
But I can call out, no one ever calls.
I call, but you never know. So anyway, but yeah, we live in a very different lifestyle. And we live right in the woods, and that helps. And there's deer, there's tons of deer, so many deer, it's ridiculous. I live in a wildlife preserve area, you're supposedly not allowed to shoot the stuff. Every once in a while people do, but not very often. And there's tons of deer, there's tons of rabbits and skunks and
Snakes.
raccoons, and there's rattlesnakes, and there's bears every once in a while, and every once in a while there's a mountain lion, and coyotes, there's all kinds of stuff. Well, I used to be a carpenter until I got involved and couldn't do carpentry work anymore, and now I get a Social Security check of $390 a month, and then plus whatever money I can make by speaking and running. And that's
Going to
why I
weird
got on this
places like
airplane to come here.
Craig, did you get a chance to?
Oh, yeah, I was wondering.
Yeah.
This is probably for a little tree here. When you're up in a tree stand, you were up there for 9 days, is that correct?
Are you gonna ask me how I went to the bathroom? Everyone asks that question. You hang your butt off the side and go.
Now you should ask Todd about how you get the person down.
That's the
Shit
real
under the
question.
tree.
Now we know why the security guard was awake all the time.
One of the first, they put out all these fake documents to try to discredit us in our area. Sometimes they're press releases with our name on it that are really written by the timber industry saying outrageous things or calling for violence. But the first one that they ever put out was really funny. We had National Tree Sit Week, and they drew this cartoon and they called it National Tree Shit Week. And these pictures, people hanging their heads over these skunks holding
It's kind of gross to deal with it, but
It's better than shitting on your platform.
yeah, it's better than shit. I think the technology that we should advance is just cutting a hole in the platform.
And having a little potty.
No, just going right through the platform because.
No, but you could have a little container to hold it if you're
No,
gonna do that.
we have one like that, and it says, look here on the bottom of it.
Other questions?
I have a question for Todd. I would like to know, A, if you consider yourself an ecofeminist, B, how you personally evolved to that point, and C, have you ever been called by other men a toady for the feminists?
Toad, yes.
A toad, I've been called a toad. I was in that movement,
Toad.
children. Yeah, I consider myself an ecofeminist, and I think more of, well, first of all, I'm a single father. So a lot of where I'm coming from comes from that acknowledgement of the nurturing capacity of myself.
Tell your age and sex.
Yeah, she's a girl. She's a Scorpio too. And the age of my girl?
Yes.
Yeah, she's 5, or she will be 5 in November. So I've had 5 years of taking care of this child, right? That for me was a huge reality check. What's happened? What is this kid going to be able to do when this kid's my age? What am I leaving behind? What's the legacy that's being left behind for this child? So, I don't know, I guess, yeah, I'm an ecofeminist, because I have the role, I'm a mother and a father, I'm a warrior and a lover, and all those things encompasses who I am. And, since I was pretty young, I knew that I was dissatisfied. I couldn't articulate it, but I was dissatisfied with the culture I was living in. I grew up in suburbia, Sacramento, California, capital city of California. A lot of political things happened that I involved myself in, but at the same time, it was always like asking my mother, tell me stories of the farm where you grew up in the Midwest, going to the mountains, spending a lot of time in the Sierra mountain range, trying to just get a grip there, reading books like Kerouac and all that, and Snyder, what their trip was about getting away from the city, getting into a place where you could be more harmonious and find some essential truths that I have found. But nobody has ever face-to-face called me a toady for the feminist, but I believe that sentiment lies in some aspects of the community where I live. yeah, I've just perceived it. It hasn't, nobody's ever said, oh, you know, you're just Barry's lackey or something like that.
But you know, there's a lot of men like this in the area too. That's the other thing though, is that it's an evolving culture, so that Todd isn't the only gentle man in our movement. There's quite a few of them. So there's a whole peer group that he could be a part of without people laughing at him to his face.
Right.
But I
Right.
know a lot of times men will accuse feminist men, non-feminist men will accuse feminist men of being traitors.
Oh, absolutely.
You're going over to the end.
We've had that. No, we've had that happen. Like for example, with the Anderson Valley Advertiser, local paper, which used to be awesomely funny, but the editor has this little problem with sexism. He began attacking the women in just ways that weren't okay, and some of the men were sticking up for us. And I remember one of the letters where one of the men stuck up for us. He called him a castrati for sticking up to us. When we sung that song "Burning Times" at this one conference, that was a very nasty, aggressive conference, and some of the men made fun of us for singing it. And one of the men who was with us, this is a guy whose totem is a bear, and he looks like a bear. He's not somebody you mess with. He's my professional bodyguard. When sometimes I travel with bodyguards, and he's actually a trained bodyguard, and he is just awesome. He's this big, wonderful, gentle man. Well, the next day in the circle, he criticized the men who made fun of us for singing that song. And he was immediately criticized for sticking up to us. So I've definitely seen that happen. But we kind of live in such an insulated area where we have this culture where we're so used to this stuff. It's such an eclectic and weird culture that so we sometimes don't know how to relate to the rest of the world.
Relatively obvious.
What's a toady?
Lackey.
Sycophantic,
These are all beyond my.
A
That's a great word. Factotum is different. That's somebody like does all your.
No, not factotum.
A gentleman, yeah, like an errand boy or something, errand boy for the films, like he's our lackey. He's doing our bidding instead of doing what he would really do if he was a real man.
A man's gotta do what a man's gotta do. I mean, it's not an issue of sex, in my opinion, period. It doesn't have to do with a man.
Women love him.
That's why I'm a feminist. Yeah, well, I'm a parent, I'm a father first. Yeah, I'm a father, and I'm a father first, I'm an activist. You know, I mean, it's like that whole thing is part of my makeup, you know.
And it's not like, there's some men in the movement who strain to acknowledge feminism, but Todd has never apparently had any problem at all with strong women or feminist tactics or the underlying principles. Although some women I see really straining under it, it seems to come very natural to Todd, which is probably because of being a single parent.
And a good mom,
And
and
raised
a strong,
by-
a
she is.
strong
Good mom.
woman, yeah, role models.
Yeah.
I see. I think it was a trip for me. I was in a situation that I mean, from being a male, you know, it's like I didn't understand this whole sexism issue, you know, because for me it wasn't like, you know, I never had been inclined to give a man more respect than a woman just because of the gender. I've always been somebody that looked at what that person's actions were or what that person was saying as an individual. But, you know, and it's just by nature.
And one reason also is because his mom is awesome.
Yeah.
That's probably another reason why it'd be hard to live in his
But so is
problem.
his dad.
Yeah, that's true. So it would be hard to live in his family and not be impressed by both of them, not see them as equal.
Todd, what was your name for this earlier today?
Oh, slave chronometer.
Slave chronometer.
Industrial time.
We are very well trained in industrial society to be slaves to these things. I
And we
carry
are,
one.
by the way, we come to everything a half hour or an hour late.
Well,
It's very hard to get.
and we're very trained to get fidgety at the scheduled closing time for class, and I have picked up a little bit of that, but perhaps by way of transition to a less formal discussion afterwards, I can certainly attest that this is a very different culture that we're talking about in Ecotopia. My first visit where I met Judi was in a tiny place called Boonville at a community organization meeting. And I was familiar with Gary Snyder's work, who Todd mentioned, and that he was one of the first proponents of not only bioregional thought, but the idea of watershed organizing. And just as when I originally read The Monkey Wrench Gang, I didn't have any clue that people actually did that stuff. Having read Gary Snyder, I had really no idea that there was actually any watershed organizing going on until that evening. And everything was organized by watersheds. There was, I can't remember all the names of the different watershed groups, but this was a part of that whole.
So bioregionalism is not just theory here.
Right. I mean, they've been working on it for a couple decades now, up there in the Pacific Northwest and Southern Oregon.
To add to that, that it's something that just, when you're living in a rural situation, especially in a mountainous situation where half the year you have a drought and the other half you have torrential rainstorms, the geography sets it up for that. Like I said, I have to ford a creek that becomes a raging river. Well, when I'm on that other side of the river, that neighborhood is very tight. I mean, that we raise our kids together, we cook together, we recreate together, and a lot of us, we don't spend time in front of television because we don't have electricity. So it's like creates that kind of community-based response to outside community problems.
And I live up this mile up this windy road and then down a 3.5-mile hellacious dirt road, and there's always an inch of dust on the back of my car. And when the torrential rains come in the winter, we get cut off sometimes, and it snows up on my hill, and we get cut off on the bottom. And it does make you just think of it. And when they're logging in your area, you think in terms of watershed. So the basic unit of organization is the watershed group. And Earth First relates to all the different watershed groups and provides the direct action experts to climb the trees and stuff, but the watershed groups initiate the actions depending the areas.
Well, the other thing that's really worth noting when looking at this subculture, if you will, not just in Northern California, but nationally where Earth First is emerging, I think it's certainly true, as Judi suggests, that a lot of the men strain under the leadership of strong women in the movement, but at the same time, I've never seen more discussion of gender relations in any subculture that I've been in. And I've never met more men who are working harder at being feminist men than within these subcultures, not just in Northern California. So it's not just ecotopia, regardless of the fact that we've all got our gendered tapes that play themselves out in all sorts of pathological ways. There's not a lot of places where I've seen people working on that and talking about it in gender workshops that almost ad nauseum.
Workshops you want, the deciding factor is who does the dishes at the end of the day. I mean, it's lifestyles are more important than workshops, and who takes care of the kids. It's all the difference in the world, being a mother and not being a mother. All the difference in the world, your whole outlook on life, and all of those things.
And in terms of the kitchen, I mean, it's certainly not a perfect picture, but I've seen more egalitarianism in the communal kitchens of the movement than I've seen anywhere else in this culture. And that you're right, looking at that kind of thing tells you a lot more about what's happening in a movement than what's being verbalized at the workshops.
And part of it just has building the shell of the new society and the old. What are the values we want to promote? Well, let's start by building them within our own culture.
Which I would like to see a lot more women to be farmers and stuff, too. Some of the men are doing it.
Yeah, we want the men to stay down and cook the meals.
Well, I want to give everybody a chance to escape who needs to, and anybody who has specific questions that they'd like to ask, a chance to ask some of those things. And also just to remind you about tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, invite you to that. There's a reception at 6:30. I imagine there'll be some other movement people from probably around the state who will be showing up at about that time that you might enjoy talking to as well. So, lots of music. I want to thank especially my students from other classes who have stayed this whole time. That shows a sort of unusual level of curiosity
We are curious.
that I think is terrific. So anyway, thanks for being here.